Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about the changes coming to Shaman in 10.0.7. These are on the PTR right now, but just keep in mind that these are subject to change, but we do want to go ahead and approach them as if this is what's set in stone right now so we can really kind of get an idea of what the class is going to look like coming into 10.0.7. Keep in mind that there are a ton of resto changes as well, but I won't be covering these. I'm just not very well versed in restoration right now. I'm not really up to date on it. But that being said, Thune, who is a very prominent resto shaman in the community, has made a video on it. So I'll have a link to that down in the description if you're more interested in the resto stuff. I haven't watched it yet because I didn't want his opinions to color my own. But that being said, I do respect his opinion. So if you're interested in that, again, it will be in the description down below. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this from more an elemental and enhance perspective. So let's go ahead and go into it. The first thing here is that Earth Elemental and Primal Elemental no longer taunt or pulse threat to enemies that the Shaman is not in combat with. I really feel like this is how it should have been working already, so this is almost like a bug fix, but that's always good. Earth Elemental and Primal Elemental no longer taunt or pulse threat to enemies that are attacking a player with tank specialization. Now, this is both a good and bad change. It's a good change if especially if you were playing in the Sanguine week this past a couple weeks ago. You'll probably have times where if you were using that, your Earth Elemental, especially if you don't have Primal Elementalist and you can't control where the Elemental goes, will taunt something and just keep it in Sanguine. Or sometimes it'll taunt something and it'll, if it has a frontal, you'll aim it back at the group. These are things that are always going to be bad, and now that won't be an issue. However, there were times where you did want to have the Elemental taunt something while the tank was taunting other things, so it would absorb some of that damage and help the tank take less damage in like big pulls. So that won't be a usage for this anymore. I really wish they had just put the AoE taunting or the ability to taunt off a tank player on like some sort of button that could have gone on the pet bar somewhere. I wish they had kept that as an option, but at least now you always know what it's going to do. But however, in a Mythic Plus environment, all it's ever really going to do is just provide you with that health now. It's not going to do anything to help out the group from a tanking perspective, except for maybe wipe protection if the tank dies. Gives the healer a chance to, or whoever has the battle res to get the tank up. Maybe for that it's still somewhat useful, but I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about that totally. Some ways it's good, some ways it's bad, but I do wish we had the option to choose between those two things. But moving on, Astral Shift duration has increased to 12 seconds. It was 8, and then that was moved away from Plains Traveler, which had that duration before. Astral Bulwark now reduces damage taken by initial 20 instead of 15, which is what it was. So this brings it back into the original state it was on beta. So let's talk about all of that as one. First off, the fact that the Plains Traveler is no longer having that increase to the duration of Astral Shift is really not the reason why anyone was taking Plains Traveler. Everyone takes Plains Traveler because of the cooldown reduction. So this doesn't really do anything. Astral Bulwark going up to 60 is nice, but it's extremely niche because especially in like a Mythic Plus setting, a lot of times you need that cooldown reduction. I don't think this really accomplishes as much as they think it might. There's very few situations where you actually need the full 12 seconds of Astral Shift. So that's just really weird to me. Another thing to think about is now that this is 20%, while that is good that they buffed it, it's just kind of weird because now you take Astral Shift and Astral Bulwark 2 points to get 60% damage reduction. What does that sound like? 60% damage reduction on a 2-minute cooldown? That sounds like greater invisibility, which is what something that a mage has that reduces the damage taken by 60%. Except they also have shields, they also have ice block, they also have alter time. They have so many more defensives than Shaman does. And I just don't understand how we still haven't seen any change to the amount of cooldowns we have, or even just another charge of Astral Shift when you're taking 2 points right now to get the same effect as 1 point for a mage that has 4 times the amount of defensives as we do. It just feels really odd. I still don't really know how to justify that. And at the end of the day, you're going to be taking Plains Traveler in most situations anyway. Like if you're in Mythic Plus and you're doing a boss like Herja, if you want to have Astral Shift line up for 2 of the lightning phases for Herja, you have to take Plains Traveler still. You still can't take Astral Bulwark. So, I don't know. It just feels very niche anyway. This doesn't accomplish anything in my opinion. So, there you go with that. Unfortunate. It doesn't really change anything in terms of what talents you're going to take. So, you know, kind of a wash there. Improved Lightning Bolt has been removed, but then they're also increasing the damage of Lightning Bolt by 20% for all specializations. So basically, it's just being baked in. No real change there. We're just taking those 2 points and being able to redistribute them elsewhere. So that is nice that we have 2 points refunded there. Thunderstorm has been moved. There's actually a couple things that have been moved. We'll talk about that when we actually get into the game here in a second. Go with the Flow now reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walk by 10 and 20 seconds instead of 7.5 and 15 seconds, which is nice because the Go with the Flow for Spirit Walk already felt pretty weak. It just didn't feel necessary. So this will at least give it a little bit more of a boost there. This is actually one of the bigger changes is Thunderous Pause can now trigger once every 20 seconds instead of 60. Thunderous Pause was already good in some situations. I don't know how this is going to work for PvP. I'm not going to talk about that. That sounds kind of nuts for PvP because it can break snares, but for PvE, this actually gives it a lot more usability because you can get that burst of speed more often. So this is going to become a bigger consideration. Before it was more of a niche pick. I did use it on Sinarth just to get that burst of speed for stairs, but this will give you a burst of speed more often. Kind of gives you more usage out of it like you did in Shadowlands. So that makes it just not a little bit better, actually a lot bit better. So that's something that's a good change there. Poison Cleanse Totem now removes all poison effects from the target. Let's go. It was just one application. The big place where we would see usage of this right now was in Algathar's Academy, and in Algathar's Academy, it can on the tree boss, it can the little ads will apply like upwards of like 40 stacks sometimes, and only removing one application, you know, that was never going to be useful. So looking ahead to the future, this will be useful for like Halls of Infusion, as well as Brackenhide Hollow. So it does also have some usefulness in the future. This basically just justifies it now as a talent point. It actually makes sense as a talent now. I will say, just to warn people, for Algathar's Academy, while we're still in Season 1 here, that this really won't be something that will allow you to solo that Poison Cleanse because of the fact that you can't target who you're cleansing. It only does it 4 times, and if the tank isn't getting immediate aggro and the little ads get at least even 1 stack on every single person in the group, it's possible that it never even targets the tank, or it targets the tank really late because it'll just cleanse things based on if they have it, yes or no. So if someone gets like 1 stack, it will still try to do that sometimes over the tank that might have like 20 or 30. So just keep that in mind. This is supplementary. It will help in those situations, and it will be more useful for like Brackenhide or for Halls of Infusion, but it won't let you really solo it consistently unless the tank is doing a really good job of getting immediate aggro. But this, at the very least, it is solidifying its point as a talent and actually making it feel somewhat worthwhile. So that's good. Moving on, Enfeeblement now applies during Hex and it lasts for 6 seconds. I don't think Enfeeblement is being used at all in PvP or PvE just about anywhere, and putting that slow on during the Hex, I don't know. Maybe PvP consideration. I can't see that ever being useful for PvE. Ancestral Wolf Affinity has moved from the class tree and been kind of redistributed there. I don't think many people used Ancestral Wolf Affinity, so that's not really a big deal. Focused Insight has been moved to the Enhancement and Elemental Specialization trees. We'll talk about how that's been moved, but honestly, Focused Insight is, especially for Enhance, when they already want so many different points, it's going to be really hard to ever consider taking that, and it feels really weird in Elemental, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Swirling Currents has been redesigned. It increases the healing of Healing Stream Totem and Cloudburst Totem by 10 and 20%. Now, what this used to do is it basically, after you used Healing Stream Totem, your next 3 healing casts did more healing, essentially. But now what it's doing is just increasing the heal of your Healing Stream Totem and Cloudburst Totem. So for Elemental and Enhanced specifically, this is a huge nerf. Because of the way that we used it before, it gave you a nice big burst out of those healing surges to counteract some form of damage if you needed to, like just burst healing on yourself. Like Herja is another good example for how you could be using that, putting the Healing Stream Totem down and then burst healing on yourself to keep yourself up. This does nothing for Elemental and Enhance. This is actually a huge nerf to our survivability out of our healing, which feels really weird, but I will say, at least for Resto, this will be something that is an auto pick. But it does take that burst healing away from Resto as well. So kind of a strange change. I'm not really happy with this at the moment. And then several talents have been moved. So these are all things that have been moved, and we can go over that in just a second when we pull up the game. So just on a base value right here, it feels really weird that we're losing that self-healing burst and not really seemingly gaining anything in return. Like, some of these things are nice. Like, yes, it's nice that they buffed Thunderous Paws and Poison Cleanse and go with the flow and stuff like that, and just kind of giving us a little bit more points back by removing some other things. But survivability is probably the biggest question mark for Shaman right now, especially Elemental and Enhance, and it feels like that is being kind of gutted here for almost no gain. But we'll talk about it as we get into the game here, so we can kind of see how the layout of the class tree looks now. So let's go ahead and get into that now. All right, so we'll start off with the class tree here, and you can see that it looks very different from what you might be thinking if you've only seen the notes. Things have been moved around, I think, a little bit more since when they wrote those notes. But let's start off with Elemental here. If you're playing a Wildfire build where you would be wanting to take Totemic Recall for your Liquid Magma Totem, then this tree makes it so much easier now to get to Ancestral Guidance. That was something that I'd always struggled with, is you have to give up so much utility before to get both Ancestral Guidance and Totemic Recall. But with this new tree, it'll be really easy to get both without having to give up all of that utility like you do right now on live. So that's one thing that's really nice. It gives you even more points to play with. Like right now I have them in Mana Spring and Nature Swiftness, which isn't nearly as important in a Mythic Plus setting. So if you needed to take something like Cleanse Spirit, or if you wanted to even take Hex, if you needed to be the person in charge of incapacitating an enemy, you can take both of these points without having to give up pretty much anything else. You can still get your stun. You can get Thunderous Paws if you want to. You can keep Frost Shock, which sometimes was on the cutting board if you wanted to get Ancestral Guidance. So it just allows you to take more of that utility without having to give up anything else really around it. You can then also, like, let's say you didn't need like Cleanse Spirit, you could grab a Graceful Spirit if you wanted to for the reduction on Spirit Walker's Grace. So like it gives you more points here, but the big thing that you'll notice here that is different is that we can't really grab Healing Stream and Swirling Currents. Now, again, you really don't want to anymore because of how Swirling Currents was changed. Healing Stream just doesn't do enough for like a Mythic Plus consideration, so you don't really want these points. The other thing that I'm really sad about is like Earth Shield is off here to the side with no connection to anything else, meaning that you have to take Chain Heal now to get Earth Shield. This is huge for me because I always took Earth Shield in Mythic Plus because of the added defensiveness to it with Refreshing Waves or Refreshing Waters and Surging Shields. All of those things together, plus the old Swirling Currents, gave you huge bursts out of your healing surges, and now it just becomes super awkward to try to come and get Earth Shield. So we've lost, basically two big areas of defensiveness without gaining anything back. Yes, we can get more utility without having to sacrifice anything else, but we're really sacrificing, and we've really lost a big portion of our self-healing here. So that is something that it feels so weird. I'm not really sure how I feel negatively about it. I don't like being negative. I try to make my content as positive as possible, but I don't really know how to feel about that. I feel like we need something else. If we're going to be losing this much of our own survivability, then we need something else there in return. And Swirling Currents in this state is just not it. So that's how it's looking here. If you go into like a pure single target build for Elemental, as you can see here, I would still take Earth Shield because you won't need as much utility in a raiding environment. You can kind of pick and choose exactly what you need, but because of the way it's now been shifted around, you just have so many more points elsewhere that you can easily duck into. It doesn't feel as overly committal to Ancestral Guidance anymore. But that being said, raiding was kind of already like this. You could kind of grab whatever you wanted, so it was already in a fairly good place before, but now you're just kind of having to like really try to get more usage out of your healing. So the healing has just really suffered across the board, and that's something that's just really unfortunate there. If we go over to enhancement here, we can kind of look at the tree and how that works, but it's kind of the same story. It's still just is kind of gimped. Beforehand, it's actually worse for Enhance, if I'm being honest, because of the fact that Enhance never cared about Totemic Recall, so that was never a consideration for them. That was more of an elemental thing. So it feels almost worse for Enhance. Again, it's the same tree, so you can kind of look at it the same way, but the biggest thing here is that there's just, again, with Swirling Currents being redesigned, that just really crushes its spirit. It didn't have refreshing, it doesn't really, like, you were never taking refreshing waters as enhanced because you just couldn't have the points. There's so many points in enhance that affect builds, and you always want more of them. Like in this like Mythic Plus build, if you could also come in and grab Swirling Maelstrom without having to give anything up, everyone would do it. So it's not like if you had one more point, you would then take refreshing waters. So it was never really a consideration for enhancement. So it's really just, you're just losing so much extra self-healing, and that's just really sad. Again, you do have more access to more utility, but again, that wasn't really an issue for Enhance. It kind of just feels like a wash overall. Again, Thunderous Paws getting that boost will be nice. The usability of Poison Cleanse Totem is going to be nice, but, it just doesn't, I don't know. This ain't doing it for me, honestly. Again, for Elemental, it is much better in the sense that you're not having to really like pinch pennies for your points in order to get Ancestral Guidance and Totemic Recall. Like for me, that's the biggest thing. That's the only real redeeming thing about the changes to the class tree in terms of its placement, is that won't be an issue for me anymore, and I can still grab all that utility. So that's nice. But in any other situation, it just like this, the loss of that healing is kind of too big in my opinion. Talking about Focused Insight, and this is where Ancestral Wolf Affinity was on the elemental side of tree. Casting Flame Shock and reducing the mana cost of your next heal and increasing its effectiveness by 30%. Again, you're never going to take this in Enhance because you just don't have the points for it. You're going to always want to take more damage. But let's pretend for a second that you did. Like, again, this is after casting Flame Shock. Flame Shock's just a weird spell to have to cast for Elemental and Enhance in order to get this effect, because keeping up Flame Shocks is just not something that either class or either spec has to worry about right now. That's something that kind of just happens on its own. It's really only at the beginning of a pull that you're ever really worrying about casting Flame Shock. So needing to recast it just to get a 30% increase on your healing, it's just weird. It would have been fine as a neat bonus, but because it's in the spec tree now, it's going to be something that's going to be really hard to touch. If we go back over to Elemental, it's in a little bit better of a place than it is for Enhance, in the fact that there was times with certain builds you'd come down here, just like like this build I have here for pure single target. Maybe you pick it over Primordial Fury, but it feels like a wash. Having to cast that Flame Shock just to get more of your own self-healing just feels really weird. And just to note, this doesn't proc off of Primordial Wave. So that's just like one less time that you can get it. So it made more sense in the class tree, but I understand that they changed this because of Resto. And I understand that. I'd rather they just get rid of it in general, to be honest. If they're trying to move it into the class tree, there might be a situation where this might be useful. But again, it's not applying off of Liquid Magma Totem or Primordial Wave. So it's kind of dead in the water except for very, very niche situations. So yeah, I probably talked too much about that talent and I really need to. It's not going to be a major consideration in any build right now. So that's pretty much it. I don't like being doom and gloom. I'm not a doom and gloom kind of guy. It is better for Elemental. It's worse for Enhance. But I want to see more changes. Honestly, I really want to see more defensives. That's like one of the biggest things. There's some tuning considerations. There's a whole slew of issues when it comes to Elemental and its damage profiles, mainly because of the spec tree, but man, that's a whole nother can of worms. That's a different video entirely right there, so I don't want to get into that so much. But yeah, that's kind of the state of it right now. It's not negative. Like, a lot of these changes are good. It's just the loss of the self-healing is a big hit to our survivability for both Elemental and Enhanced. So, take of that what you will. Give your feedback on the forums if you're trying to, let Blizzard know how you feel about it. Please don't harass anyone on the forums. We don't want to do that. Just be constructive with your criticism. But yeah, my biggest thing is I would like more defensives out of our kit. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Do you think they're good changes? Do you think they're kind of meh? It's kind of a wash in my opinion, but let me know what you guys think. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/ridmark. Come check me out there as well. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.